So this will be a little different tonight. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I was here and I'm gone, but I'm back. I love coming back here. I'm part of the Foundations Baptist Fellowship International, which is a group of fundamentalists that get together and we discuss issues and we try to encourage each other in the things of the Lord. Dr. Bob Jones III is in that, and there are pastors from all over the country that are as a part of this thing. And we were together in Indianapolis Monday and Tuesday, all day in meetings. And then I said, well, my mother just lives in South Bend. I'm going to stay for one more day. And then I asked Pastor Harper if I could stay in the church house because my brother's got a dog, and I don't like sleeping with dogs. I like my brother, I like my mom, I like my cousins, or my nephews, and the dog's okay as long as he doesn't sleep with me. But I never know what he's going to do. So I asked if I could stay in the house, and he says, you can stay in the house, but you got to preach. That's why you're stuck with me, all right? But anyway, we loved it here. We really did. We owned a house down there on Wabash when we left here and sold it and moved here, and I haven't owned a house since then. I live in the steeple of a church. If you ever look up our church, it's www.hamiltonsquare.org. And we're 6 blocks from City Hall in San Francisco. If you look outside my window from the church steeple where I live inside the church steeple. You open the front window. When I have my devotions in the morning, I often open the window so I can take in all the fresh air. And I look out my window, and there are 3 or 4 lanes of traffic on Franklin Street going by, boom, just like that in the morning. And then there's a red light, and then there are 3 or 4 lanes of traffic that go boom like that next to my church from Geary Boulevard, 2 of the busiest streets in the whole city. They go right by the front door of our church. This past Sunday, we celebrated 142 years as a church. The church has been there all that time. Started by a Swedish sea captain who came into the city, got a burden for it, and started a church in his home. And then it grew to what it is today, and we've been there for many, many years. And my wife and I would never be there. We loved it right here in Wakarusa, and we really enjoyed being here. But God gave me a burden for camp ministry, and so they called me out to California to run a camp. How many of you remember when we went to do that? Okay, so we went out to run this camp, and we ran out, and we ran this place called Castle Point for 4 years, and then the board looked at the money and the situation with the finances and how old the building was and all of that, and they decided to close it down, and we didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. We'd spent all our money to get there, and where we were going to go. So then the pastor of the church at the time at Hamilton Square said, we've got this little apartment here in the church. You can stay here until you figure out what you're going to do next. And then we stuck around there for a year looking around, and eventually the Lord just opened the door and we stayed there. We stayed there for 4 or 5 years. There was discussion of me becoming the pastor. It didn't happen in the time frame that I expected. And then another church in New England asked us to go out there, so we went to New England. I pastored in New England. That came to a close. And then we came back and I was pastoring out in the country in New England. I loved it out there in New England. I love the country. I do. I'm very comfortable with the country. This morning we went down and had breakfast. Mike and Pastor and I went down to, where was that? Rent Town, and ate at this Amish restaurant. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. I loved it. And we had a great time there, and it's just that's I am very comfortable with the country. And when we left the church in New England, and I won't get into all that and reasons for that. Some of you know the story about my daughter and all, but we ended up back in the Midwest, and Alan Lehman's, is it uncle that's down in Lodi? Was pastoring a church in Lodi, Indiana, and he was getting ready to retire, and they really wanted us to come there. A little country church out in Lodi, about an hour from where I grew up, and it was very tempting. At the same time, I got a call from San Francisco and said, they need you back out in San Francisco. And I'm going, country and the cornfields and the gardens and the horses and I love that stuff. And San Francisco. And we prayed about it, and that church needed a pastor, and that church was going to need a pastor. Our pastor, Pastor Ennis, who has been the pastor, was the pastor for 45 years. He resigned a year ago, and then I became the pastor. But I worked with him for a time, and it's obvious they were going to need a pastor. So I'm praying about this, and I'm going, more people tend to want to go to country churches than to city churches. Would you agree with that? Would you agree with that? Huh?
Especially that city.
Especially that city. How many of you have heard anything about San Francisco? Does it sound like someplace you want to be? Yeah, I mean, you can talk to me. I want to hear from you, okay? I'm going to ask you questions. I want to hear from you. And I can't hear very well, so you're going to have to talk loud, okay? But I had been there. And I would never have gone there straight from here to go from one church to another because I was happy right here. But God used a camp to get me there to see it and to catch a vision for it. And there is a tremendous need there, tremendous need. Right now, 6 months ago, I think it was, about halfway after I became pastor, a guy with a big bushy beard, slick back hair, wearing a t-shirt, pair of blue jeans, kind of rough looking guy, walked in on a Wednesday night, and he said, I go to Calvary Chapel on the weekends, but I'm in the city during the week. I work for Ron Paul's campaign, and they told me I should go to church during the week. He didn't know anything about the scriptures. And he said, I'll give you 3 weeks. Let's see what we can do. Well, he's still there. He's been there for 6 months now, and he's still growing. He's growing in the Lord. He's loving it. He's really, really, really growing. Recently, another young man came in. He's 22 years old. I can show a picture of him. His name's Holden, and he came from Tennessee years ago, and claimed salvation. I'm not sure about it. From a missionary Baptist background, and talked about his salvation experiences. And he went to a camp meeting, and he went down front. The Holy Spirit called him, and he went down front, and he got down, and he sat there for an hour or two, and he said, finally, I got it. I said, I don't know what you got, but he got something. And he says, I think I'm saved. But he's been coming to my church, and so he's been listening, and he's loving it. He loves the old hymns. He loves those things that we're doing. And then he said, can we go out to eat? And I said, sure. So I took him out to eat, and we were sitting there talking. He said, I got to tell you something. He says, I didn't come out here to San Francisco alone. I have a partner. And that partner, by the way, is an African-American transgender woman who wants to be a man. And, I tried not to drop my teeth on the floor like you would. And I said, oh, okay, well. And he said, I wanted to check the church out to see if it would be all right to bring them to church. I don't even know what to call the gender. And I said, well, did we treat you badly? Because I sensed there was a homosexual background in his life. He said, no. He said, you all have been very friendly to me. But he says, I'm looking for truth. And I want to hear it, and I'm sensing I'm hearing truth from you. And so he's been coming regularly. And he said, should I bring my partner? I said, bring him. I said, we're not going to change our message. You know where I stand on this. There are two genders, male and female. And it has something to do with plumbing. That's all I said. If you don't know what you are, check your plumbing, and you'll be fine. And if your partner doesn't know, check their plumbing. That's all I say. You figure it out. You go to a doctor, ask them. They'll tell you. But anyway, but we will get the gospel to them. You go to 1 Corinthians, it talks about such were some of you, but you're washed, you're cleansed, you're sanctified. You can't live that way. You can't stay that way as a believer. You've got to change. And we tell them to do that. And we've seen people like that come. I've had Thanksgiving dinner with homosexuals at dinner. And they appreciate the fact that we love them, we tell them the truth, and they have to decide what they're going to do with it. And some of them are actually helping us with Thanksgiving dinners and stuff like that. It's amazing. Now, we're not compromising. They know they'll never be able to join our church, so we'll never baptize them. We'll never let them take any kind of leadership. But you can come and listen just as much Any drunk off the street can come hear the gospel. Any drug addict can come and hear the gospel. Or any rich person who thinks they're too good for the gospel can come in and hear the gospel, right? And our church, we have everything. We've got this one lady lives up on Knob Hill. We call it Snob Hill. She's up on the 16th floor. She wears little dangly earrings, and she's got a home in Rome and a home in downtown Manila and a big fancy house. The table that she eats dinner with has a tabletop on it. I helped her get it. It was $20,000 for that table, and it was carved by people who do the stonework on the Taj Mahal. I have Bible studies on that. We drink coffee and little dainty, and I don't stick my finger out. But then we also have another guy named Will Shermer. He came in, I would say 4 months ago, and he had been living on the streets, literally sleeping on a blanket in front of a storefront at night. And he came in, he's searching for truth. He was clean. He'd found himself into a shelter, found a way to get cleaned up, and he comes to church. And he's sitting there, and you could just see the light come on in his eyes as he's hearing the scriptures. He came to know the Lord. He's in the process of our discipleship program right now. He asked me the other day, can I get baptized? I want to get baptized. I want to join the church. He wanted to just get a little help and then go off to Oregon, but he said, no, this is what I need. I need what you have here, and I want to grow. You should see him pick up his hymn book and sing. Wow, he's all into it. He wanted to sing in the Christmas cantata. All he has is a T-shirt and a pair of jeans. And he somehow got a job and scraped up enough money, bought a suit and tie. Now he sits in the bass section next to me and sings with me in the church choir. God's doing some things. And so don't give up on the cities. Don't give up on them. So let's look at the notes here. Why would anyone want to minister in cities? By the way, that's a picture of San Francisco on your notes from the air. Good question. I'm glad you asked. Let's just go through some of this. In our discipleship program, I went through some old notes that we had, and the first paragraph there gives some statistics from 1996. In 1996, 46% of the world's population lived in cities. That's about half of the world lives in cities. Then it was estimated that by 2030, 61% of the people will live in cities. And so then I said, well, what about today? And so I got online and I went to the World Bank, which is not a Christian organization. It is how businesses decide logistics on where they're going to put their businesses and where they're going to aim their energies and that sort of thing. And I found at the World Bank there that right now in 2023, statistics say 56% of the world's population, 4.4 billion people, live in cities all around the world. And this is expected to continue with the urban population more than doubling its current size by 2050, which is only 25 years from now or so, where they say 7 out of 10 people, 70% of the people in the world are going to live in cities. So we who are, I grew up in a cornfield in Illinois. I spent 2 summers on a ranch in southern Illinois. I got up and baled hay and rode horses all summer. That's what I love the country. I do. I'm very comfortable in the country. But I have found since I've been in the city and I've gotten to know the people, we went out to breakfast this morning. I get up in the morning sometimes and I'll walk down to my little coffee shop in San Francisco. And I eat the same food you eat here. And I talk to the people behind the counter just like you do the people that come and wait on you. Now they might be from Morocco, but they're human beings, and you just talk to them, and you build relationships with them, and you leave them a gospel tract, and some of them go, but you leave it anyway, and just like what happens here too. And you know my wife. How many of you know my wife? Okay, she's, 140 pounds maybe, dripping wet. She works on the 6th floor of a 35-story building as an office manager, about 1.5 miles from our church. And she works remotely sometimes. She's the office manager. And And she'll work. It's on California streets, one of the most prestigious streets in the whole city. It's one that's got the trolley cars on it that go up and down the hill. And I'll go down there and drop her off at her work, and then I'll go to McDonald's, and then I'll go sit under the Golden Gate Bridge and read my Bible for a while, and then I'll go back and go to work. And then I'll work all day, and at the end of the day, she walks home a mile from her office. And she some of you say, in San Francisco? Yeah, she does. She actually one time was walking back, and a homeless man started walking alongside of her. And she spoke to him and said, hello, and she was kind to him, and he was nice. He says, I'm just walking with you to protect you, because he says, I don't know who else is around here, and I'm walking with you to protect you. And he was a very nice man. He just happened to not have any money, and he was living in a tent on one of the streets. And he was very cordial and kind. She witnessed to him. She spoke to him. She said, can we go back and see him? We went to go back to see him, and he'd moved his tent. I don't know where he is. Another time, she walked back to the church, and this big, tall, lanky guy, might have about 25, 30 years old, followed her home. And now she's not 25 or 30 anymore, so she could be kind of grandma to him. But he's a single guy, lives in the city, and he was walking with her, very nice, very cordial, clean. He might have had long hair, I don't remember. But he walked with her all the way back to the church and had a very nice conversation with her. And then she went in the building where we live. We live in the belfry of the church, or the steeple of the church. And he followed her right in. And she handed him a gospel tract. And he thanked her. He bent over, he kissed her on top of her head, and he left. Weird. But what I'm saying is they're human beings, and they're looking for truth. I could tell you other stories. People from the Far East who are coming. In my church, we'll have Filipinos, Chinese, Koreans. I've got a Nigerian Sunday school teacher who works with our teens. He's from Nigeria. We have all of them, and they're there. And they find common grace in this. They sing the hymns, they work together, and we're seeing God do something. I cannot keep gospel tracts in the rack. I put $400 worth of gospel tracts out the other day, and I've got to refill it already. They're constantly witnessing, passing out. God is doing something. And so anyway, let's look at these things. We're not going to get through this, I can tell already. Why did I ramble? Anyway, I hope this is a help to you. Please pray for us. We really have great needs. You know in the news what happened with Nancy Pelosi's husband, right? I drove by the house after that to see what was going on. And there are newspaper reporters everywhere. They're human beings. They live in a $30 million house, but they're just human beings. They need the Lord. By the way, Nancy and I aren't good friends. But anyway, let's look at this here. Since New Testament days, the city church has been the only hope for millions of people who had no hope. There's about 1 million people that live in my city. The godly men and women who committed themselves to minister through the city church have been used by the Lord to reach millions for the Lord. Cities are made up of great crowds of people. I really do believe, there are probably more people that pass my church building every day than what live in the entire town here. Every day, just boom, 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 constantly. What did Jesus see when he looked at the great crowd? Do you see those questions there? Let's look up some verses. Get your Bibles out. Let's look at some verses. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you can look ahead and see if you can cheat a little bit and get ahead if you want. And let's see if we can get some of these questions answered, okay? My secretary just sent me these notes because I printed them up wrong, so I'm looking through these notes on my iPad. I don't ever do this, so I hope I don't mess up. What did Jesus see when he looked at the great crowds? Matthew 9:36. Here's what it says. When he saw the multitudes, he was moved with what? Compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. When I walked the 6 blocks from my church to City Hall, I had to go the other day. I had a young couple that came, and they said, we want to get married. We need to get married. We put them through a counseling program. We got them ready to get married. We had a little civil marriage ceremony now. One's from, she's from Burma, he's from the Philippines. They want all the family to come, but they didn't want to wait until the family had enough money to come for the wedding, so we did the marriage so they could get married, so that they could save on their rent. Rent, by the way, for a 1-bedroom unit is $3,500 a month, if you can find one at that price. And so they wanted, instead of living in 2 homes, they wanted to get into 1 home, save money on that rent to help get family out for a big wedding. And in a year, at the end of the year, we'll have a big wedding and all the family is going to come in. But where was I going with that? The whole idea is Jesus looked at these people and he saw them and he had compassion on them. They were as sheep with no shepherd. Oh, not what I was telling you. I was walking down to City Hall to take their license down to City Hall to get it legal, their marriage. So I went down to City Hall, and on the way down, I have to walk past a couple of alleyways in what is called the Tenderloin. And basically, most of the dirty drug addicts things that you see in San Francisco are within a few blocks of City Hall. City Hall is just massive. It's beautiful. Marble inside. It is worth, I can't even begin to imagine how many billions of dollars it's worth. And it's as big as the state capitol in California. But you go inside there, and I went inside there with the registration papers for their wedding, the license. And I had to go to a countertop to have it all legalized. And I end up behind a line of people. The ones right in front of me happened to be 2 homosexual men who had their marriage license with them. And they were friendlier in front of me than I wanted them to be. But nothing I can do. They're not going to listen to me. I know when somebody's tender, I can talk to them. When they're not, you know better than to mess with them. And then they ended up going to the counter. And I can tell you, what I'm trying to tell you is there are people in San Francisco who do not agree with that lifestyle at all. It may be 10% of the population. That may be a higher percentage than the rest of the nation. The reality is in the nation is probably 3 to 5%. But in our city, it might be 10%. But I went up to this couple went up to the counter to put their license in. This little Filipino guy took their license and he kind of stood back like this, and he got their paperwork and he put it down. And then I went up to take the next marriage license for a real marriage, by the way. And I started up and he said, "Stop." So I backed up. He said, "No, back up." I backed up a little more, and he got out Lysol after those 2 guys had been by and just sprayed everything down with Lysol. And then he said, "Okay, now come up." And I gave him the paperwork and we were fine. So I'm telling you, there are good people there who don't agree with the sinful lifestyle. They're totally opposed to it. They know it's wrong. They know it's evil. They're like sheep that have no shepherd. They need someone to be there to give them the gospel, to tell them the truth, to give them the answers. Where did Jesus go first to teach and preach? Matthew 11:1. Anybody read that? Into the cities, it says there. It came to pass when Jesus had made an end of commanding the 12, he departed thence to teach and preach in the cities. What was the attitude what was Jesus' attitude towards crowded cities? Matthew 14:14. Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude. He's looking at the city of Jerusalem. I was there last summer. It's about 1 million people. And Jesus went forth, saw a great multitude, was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. Luke 19, verse 41, when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it. Another man that I'm working with right now, his name's James. He just got out of prison. They require him to live in a halfway house. He can't leave that house without certain permissions. And so every week he gets permission to come to church. He comes to church, he has so much time, then he has to go back to the halfway house until his probation is over. But he is growing in the Lord, and he's already asked me, he says, Pastor, when I get out, I'm getting out in April, and the halfway house is over, and I'm moving up to Northern California. Can you help me find a church? He says, I think I know one. Would you check this church out? I checked it out. I'm going to go up there and preach in that church and try to help those people. It might be 20 people. Little city, middle of nowhere, out there. And he's planning on, he's growing in the Lord. He's trying to go, he's in church when he can be there. He worked at one of the cities, they call them safe houses. And the safe house is a place that the city has, they've gone in and they've taken over an old hotel building or an old apartment complex. And what they do is they take people from the halfway house. Imagine the foolishness of this. They take people from the halfway house, they give them a job, and they put them in this halfway house to oversee the thing. And they give them Narcan. You know what Narcan is? Narcan is a shot that you give to drug addicts if they overdose, and hopefully to keep them alive. And my friend James was working in one of these places. Because he's an ex-con, it's hard for him to get work, period. So he took the job to do this, to work in this safe house. So he goes into this safe house, and he mentions to a couple of guys, I'll pray for you. And his boss comes in and says, we don't do that here. If you do that, we will fire you. So he had to back off, and every once in a while he would say, slip up because he's growing in the Lord, and he'd say, God bless you, or something. No, we don't do that here. They say, we don't live by the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We go live by the platinum rule. Well, what is that? Do unto others as they would have you do unto them. What does that translate? He wants to do drugs. You give him what he needs to do his drugs, and just give him a Narcan shot if he overdoes it. Your job is one thing. Let him do whatever he wants and just make sure he doesn't die. Literally, that's what they told him. He came to me as he's growing in the Lord. He says, Pastor, my conscience won't let me do this anymore. I said, yeah, neither could I. He says, I think I'm going to quit my job. I said, okay, I think that's a good choice. And now he works at a regular hotel, just checking people in and out of the hotel. There are churches in San Francisco that don't preach the gospel anymore. There's one church I can tell you, Glide Memorial Methodist Church. It's an old church that Bob Jones Sr. used to hold revival services in. A wealthy lady left $5 million, which today would translate into the billions, to keep that church going. Then they got a preacher, and by the way, be careful about this. When this guy retires, make sure you get somebody who loves the Lord and loves the Word. Don't retire yet. But they got a preacher in who didn't believe the gospel anymore. It was like the days of Joseph. There arose another Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. And he stopped preaching the gospel, went total social gospel. That church right now, I showed my mom this afternoon a picture of their ministry T-shirt. Across the back, it's black letters. It's a black T-shirt, and across the back, it has two needles crisscrossing like this. And their ministry is to go into the streets of San Francisco and give clean needles to drug addicts so they don't get sick from dirty needles. This is what's going on. Social gospel, social, it's all that. But at the same time, people are waking up in the city and saying, this isn't working. There are businesses that are closing, and now they're coming to our church and saying, tell us the truth, will you? And they're responding to it. So God's doing something. All right, what was, let's see here. Matthew 23:37. I'll let you do the rest of this on your own afterwards because I think we're going to be running out of time. What was Jesus' heart's desire for the great city of Jerusalem? Matthew 23:37. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, stonest them which are sent unto thee. How nice of a city was that? How often I would have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathereth her chickens under her wings, and ye would not. We could try to get the gospel. I can try to get Scott Wiener. You ever heard that name, Scott Wiener? pray that God removes that man from office. He is a staunch, rabid homosexual. If you even say to him, and some of us pastors go to talk to the senators in Sacramento and try to get in with Gavin Newsom, who used to be San Francisco's mayor, by the way. And we try to get in to see them, and we go talk to them, and we try to tell them the truth. And basically, we go in and say, can we pray for you? How can I help you? And we want you to know that there are people in this state who still believe that there are two genders only. And if you say that, Scott Wiener will immediately shut down and won't even talk to you. And he sends staff out to keep you from getting back in to speak him, because he's so bent on promoting this whole agenda. And by the way, he is in line to take over when Nancy Pelosi lets loose. So you think Nancy was bad? Pardon my English, you ain't seen nothing yet. Okay? This is why we're here in the city, because we care about people, and they're not always nice, they're not always neat, they're not always wrapped up in a bow, they don't dress like us, they don't smell like us, they don't act like us. But they are souls for whom Jesus died. And he loves them. And if he loves them, I have to love them. I don't always like them. There's one guy, his name's Shane. I have literally, I'm just a little guy, you know. And I just go out there and say gently, would you please leave? That's not it. I sometimes have to get right in his face and say, you are leaving now, and if you don't get out of our courtyard now, I'm going to pick you up and throw you out of here. You say, you wouldn't do that. Well, you would if you had children coming in your church and you have a guy who's opening up pornography right there on his phone right in front of those children and getting ready to act upon what he's seeing. You say, you can't let this happen in my church in front of kids. And I have witnessed to him, I've given him clothing, I've given him food, but I will not let him do those things in front of our people, okay? But even him, as vile as he is, I keep thinking of Romans 5:8, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And I have to say, Shane, I don't like you, but I have to love you because Jesus does. Anyway, where did Jesus send the 70 to minister? Luke chapter 10 and verse 1. I got to stop here. It's just the first page here. Okay, keep going. You said that? Oh, okay. I thought it was her. Okay. Okay. Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70. These are those apostles that he sent out to go witness. And he didn't send them really into a door-to-door in a suburb someplace. He sent them 2 by 2 before his face into every city and place, whither he himself would come. He went into the cities. Where is the best place to minister? Where the souls are. Now, again, I'm not trying to get you to say, okay, we got to leave Wakarusa and move to Chicago. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is, if somebody gets that burden to do that, support them, help them, encourage them. Don't tell them, oh, I got to calm down for a minute. Fox News, Sean Hannity. If I could reach through the radio and grab that guy and shake him, I would. You say, well, he's conservative. Yes, but he hates my city. I go east to recruit students to come out and help us with ministry in San Francisco. And I literally have some that just stare at me like, it may as well be Mars. And they can't handle it. They're not ready for it. And I know right now, I have a young couple. The young man grew up 2 blocks from my church. I've known him since he was this big. He plays the piano like, well, I don't want to say Liberace, but he's very skilled, okay? Very skilled. He's got a degree from Bob Jones University. He's got a master's degree from a conservatory in New York City. He can play classical, he can play hymns, he knows it all. And he loves our city. He married a young lady from the Midwest. She has got he could command $75 an hour for piano lessons in my city. She is a physician's assistant, just graduated. She could command a good salary. They're the kind of people who could make it in San Francisco financially. And they have a heart for the city. And they want to come. Matter of fact, they called me a few months ago and said, we're going to come and we're going to be there in January. What month is it now? February. They're not there. Why not? They want to come, but they're newly married, and Dad is saying, no, not my young man, but the father-in-law, the dad of the daughter in the Midwest. No, you can't go to that awful place. I was there one time. I saw terrible things. I don't ever want you to live there. If God calls someone to go, don't you tell them no. Encourage them, help them, pray for them. Somebody's got to do this. Why did I not take the Indiana church? Why did I go to San Francisco? Because it's easier to get people to go to Indiana. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It just is. But there's something about that Mississippi River that has crocodiles in it or something that nobody wants to cross. And I can take you all over the West where there are needs for churches and needs for pastors and needs for people to come out and help. I'm rambling. I'm sorry I'm rambling. This is just the burden of my heart. We've had colleges come out from various Christian colleges, and you would know the colleges if I mentioned them to you. And they're all good colleges. They're raising up young people. They're training young people for ministry. But there's something missing. Look, you need to go through these notes. One of the things that seems to be missing is that we want our kids to grow up and have a good life. And we want them to have the big house and the 2-car garage and the snowmobiles and the motorcycles and the trips to the Bahamas and all that stuff. We don't want them to sacrifice for ministry. And sometimes I think it is, I don't want them to go away because I want them to be here to take care of me. And I understand that, believe me, I do. But I'm so thankful for a mother who told me as a boy, I don't care what you do with your life, as long as you serve the Lord. That should be the spirit of a godly parent. I want you to do what God wants you to do. And if it means the mission field, or if it means a city church that is in a place that I'm not comfortable with, you go through these notes, would you? I can tell you, I've lived there now 10 years. I'm still here. All of me, more of me than was when I left here. My wife could say the same thing. We're all here. It hasn't hurt us. We've been blessed. God's been good. I own 2 pieces of property. I don't know if I'll ever own any other. They're in Watsika, Illinois, and they're 6 foot long and 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep. That's all I own. But I'm in the center of God's will, and I have plenty to eat, a nice place to sleep. I live in a $20 million mansion in San Francisco. Yeah, it's a church, but that's where I live. I sit under the Golden Gate Bridge and pray over my city, or I go over the top of it and look down on the city and pray. Pastor Harper's been there with me. It's a wonderful place to live. One of the verses that you're going to see, though, just remember this. One of those verses, you see, Paul went to, I think it was Athens. It's in here someplace. And he said he went there and he found the whole city covered with idols. And his heart was moved. I went down behind City Hall, I am out of time. I went behind City Hall not long ago to an Asian art museum that I hadn't been into. It's a massive building. It's 3 times the size of this church building. And it's 3 floors. And I went through it and I said, what is this? What is this? What is this? Asian Art Museum. It is literally 3 floors of a museum the size of the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. Every floor is loaded with idols from all over Asia. There is a lot of evil out there, folks. There are few people who have the truth. Those who don't have the truth, where do they end up? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, we have the message the world needs. Pray for us as we work in the city. I'll pray for you while you work here in the country. We're in this together. It's 2 different worlds. It definitely is. But it's the same gospel, it's the same word, the same God, and the world needs it. And I have got to stop. Study on your own. Okay? Will you do it? Will you do it? Look up the verses. Get a burden for this. Pray for us. And come see us.